The mic on? Okay. Are you shaking your head, Carrie? Okay. It's good? Okay. Thanks. You can't hear? Okay, how about that? You pick that up? Or is it just a matter of me opening my mouth? Not exactly? It's working. I can hear it. Gung, 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 gung. I hear, see Dave back there? He's not wanting to make trouble. He's telling me everything's okay. Okay, how about that now? All right, thank you. In Mark chapter 10, we have a snippet out of the lives of two of Jesus' apostles. And we're going to look at that, and then we're going to move on ahead to talk about two others. One's Philip, and the other's another James. And for those of you who haven't tried to do this, don't give me any of those. Well, what about James? That James, is he the one who wrote such and such? And, because it's not easy to put that all together. Because number one, no one really knows for sure about some of those Jameses. We certainly know about the two Jameses, or the James we're going to read about here. But the other one we're going to look at, James the son of Alphaeus, or James the Lesser. And you should look at the scholars, try to explain what the lesser means. Some say, well, maybe he just wasn't that loud, or he was short. So you can see how scholarly these people can get. And so you just get to have your pick of what he was about. Now he'll want to try to understand him a little bit better, but we'll talk about that as we get into the rest of the evening. So let's look there at Mark 10. Has anyone got it already? Mark 10, 35 through 45. I think if you saw the message I sent, I think that was a passage that was there. Okay, go ahead, Robert. I think we can hear you. So, well, yeah, 30. If you feel more comfortable with 34, I said 35, but that's all right. Yeah, we're very easy around here.
James and John, the two sons of Zebedee, came up to Jesus saying, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Grant that we may sit, one on your right and one on your left, in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you were asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They said to him, "We are able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you shall drink, and you shall be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized. But to sit on my right or on my left, this is not mine to give, but it is prepared for those for whom it has been prepared." Hearing this, the 10 began to feel indignant with James and John. Calling them to himself, Jesus said to them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. But it's not this way among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you shall be the slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many."
Okay, thanks. What is there now? This is kind of a tough question to ask because we already have certain motives attached to these guys. And but I want you to think about how it is, when you're looking for someone's going to be an elder or be a preacher or whatever, what kind of people do we often look for? Well, I can tell you that I'm not one, but I'm just saying that usually it's like somebody who's a real go-getter. Are these two go-getters? They are go-getters. There's no question about it. And while they're go-getting, the Lord is sitting there listening to them, and then what does he do? Does he say, "Yeah, you're just the kind of guy we want here, or two guys we want here"? He rebukes them, doesn't he? So I use that because in trying to understand these apostles, What causes us to be drawn to certain apostles as opposed to others? Now, that's a very blank question. But what causes us to connect with one elder or not? Go ahead.
The attributes that we see in them, sometimes maybe we self-identify with things about them, or we just like certain
Okay, I'm not catching you yet.
attributes that are talked about in the New Testament, that we can either read them and self-identify with them, and that makes them an easy way for us to relate, or we just simply like some of those characteristics
Yeah.
that are easy to tell.
Yeah, and to sort of generalize about it, it's generally the ones that we know something about. And then, of course, there are times when we do kind of connect with them. But I want you to see, as we try to get through this hour, that that's not the way Jesus picks them. We're going to look at a couple of examples and know that it just doesn't make sense. You know, why did he pick this guy? Why did he pick Philip? And then, of course, there's the other James. And what do we know about him? Absolutely nothing. All we have is his name on the list. So I don't know what your picture is of what an apostle should be and how he should behave, or what kind of image is he going to have. I don't think many of us have the images connected with us of James and John. I mean, they're really kind of almost out of control. And the Lord picks them too. What else did those guys do that was sort of out there? Let's see. They're going through Samaria. I can't hear. Yeah, let's kill them. How about lightning from heaven or fire from heaven? So, I mean, these guys are people of action, you know. So we might look at that and we might think that, now there's some guys who really are great apostles. These are go-getters. Well, certainly everybody ought to be a go-getter to a certain degree, but not to the degree these guys are. It's obvious. But how about, do you think Jesus should have kept them? I mean, it seems like to me if this was, you know, some sort of a audition or something like this, I mean, what do they do? What do you think? I mentioned the two things that they're best known for. Yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
I think Jesus, shows diversity of personalities. We can see that in the apostles.
Yeah.
For a reason, right?
Yeah.
He saw within them some characteristics that could be displayed and felt. He had to kind of
Yeah.
teach and sort of harness that. Right? And
Yeah.
so he was patient, but he also had the advantage of seeing through a person, seeing their heart, understanding deep down what they could do.
Yeah.
And so
You're not focusing on their goof-ups. You know, it's like Peter's the same way.
certain characteristic. It's if you look at these guys, they're all different, but they all bring something unique.
Yeah.
That kind of fits the mold of everybody.
Right.
Everybody here, everybody that's a Christian.
Right. So that may be why. I'm sorry, Mitch. Go ahead. I interrupted your sentence.
So then, it's just how Jesus draws that out, right? And then they shine in various ways after
Yeah.
this resurrection.
You know what happens to the James partner here? He doesn't last long. Remember in Acts chapter 12, he gets executed with a sword. So, I mean, you're not shocked by that. But obviously, these guys were hard workers for the Lord, and they were going to take a stand. And if they I don't know that they ever understood that, we have to be very careful about how we behave, and it's not always about pulling out the sword. It doesn't say that James pulled out a sword. It just says he was executed by a sword. But I suspect there was a reason for it, that he stirred up the law and those who were leading. So, we've got these guys that seem like the Lord. People like fiery people. You know, kind of really get you all excited. And I think to understand is that not everybody who leads is that kind of a leader. Now, do we need, well, we need humble leaders. Do we need, I won't say do we need them, but are exciting leaders, are they good? People ready to sort of take on the opposition? Go ahead, Robert. Oh, that was, they pointed out who? Go ahead, Jessica.
One of the traits that I think is notable about from James, John, and Peter, and that's because they're the trio that always go with Jesus,
Yeah,
unfathomable loyalty to Jesus.
yeah.
They're extremely loyal to him.
So they do show that. Say that a little louder.
They show extreme loyalty to Jesus over and over again.
Yeah.
James and John, to the point where they want to be at the ready to be by Jesus' side at all times.
Yeah.
That's how I always took the request, is that it is a little, yes, it was a little impertinent of them to ask such a request of him, but it just goes to show they always want to be with him. They always want to be by his side.
Yeah, so that is something that we would probably very strongly take into consideration, because he's out there trying to establish himself, not trying, but actually doing it, and not everybody's liking them, so there do need to be brave people. So, does everyone need to be like those two? If we were all that way, how do you think the congregation would be? It'd be a tough job for elders, I can tell you that. All right. Ian, I see you kind of twitching. You want to say something?
I was just going to say, Paul remarks about that, the idea of every member, and it's an interesting play on words, but every member is important, because the eye can't say I don't need the hand, and the hand can't
Right.
say
The
I don't
1
need
Corinthians
the
12,
mouth.
yeah.
And that's kind of that idea of if we're all a hand,
Yeah.
we're going to be dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And so in that same way to your question, yeah, we need every single member because they're all important in their own way.
Right. Okay. Great. Appreciate that. All right. So we've got those guys, and one ends up dying. Is he the James that writes the letter to James? Probably not. He died too soon to get that done at the time that it was supposed to be written. But do you know who it is, Robert? Are you going to take a shot at that?
No, I was going to say something more about the James that was a martyr.
Okay.
That I think it's interesting that James is asking Jesus, we want to be in a place where we're on your right and left, we want to be exalted, kind of
Yeah.
first thought of people. And Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking for. If you want to drink from my cup, okay, are you sure? And they don't quite understand what they're asking, but it's interesting that the first martyr, the first of the apostles who actually killed is James, the son of Zebedee.
Yeah.
And in a way, he kind of gets what he asked for,
Yeah.
in a sense, in that he is the first to die for the church, and he's remembered for that as the first martyr.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we like James. He was brave, but he had to get off of that. We want to do something that's going to make us be the greatest. And they didn't really understand it. We know they didn't understand about what Jesus was going to do. That thing had to sort of run completely its course up to the resurrection. But nevertheless, we might say, all right, Mitch, I'll go back to you as someone who, that hires people. All right, so you got these guys here, and you know what you'd like for them to do, and you're thinking maybe these guys are just a little bit over the top. I'm assuming Jesus understood who they were, because most people who look at his calling him the sons of thunder, a lot of the scholars look at that and they say, well, Jesus was really kind of laughing when he said that. He goes, it's like he was saying, these people are over the top. And Now go ahead, Mitch. So how would you look at those two guys?
Well, I mean, yeah, you have to look at the whole person, their potential, but I think if you think back to Jesus and he sees this and he sees those characteristics, right? And initially is coming from a place of trying to glorify themselves.
Right.
And he gets into a place where they're glorifying God.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I think God sees that. God, the Son, Jesus the Son, sees that.
So he's sort of steering them in that direction.
Look,
Yeah.
I see that, and I can use that. And they're thinking from a self-glorification.
Yeah.
I want to be at your right hand and your left. And kind of see the
Yeah.
prominence. And he's like, you will, but you'll do that
Yeah.
by glorifying me. And you'll understand, right?
Yeah. And if anyone could understand, you might have a problem understanding someone, or I may have a problem understanding someone, but Jesus knew what these guys were made of because he could see into their hearts. All right. Any other thoughts? You ever thought about, I mean, when you think of apostles, who do you think of? What? Okay, James, John, Peter, what else? Paul. Oh, it's Paul. Paul's number one, I think. Why is that? Yeah, I mean, he's out there. You know, he's the writer, and he wasn't always easy to understand. Sometimes, you know, he was offending people. But for the most part, you know, he was very straightforward about what he was teaching. He wasn't trying to be complicated or anything. He just, you know, he knew what the problem was, and what was the basic problem in those days that he handled head on. Say it. Judaizing teachers, yeah. So he gets a lot of print, you know, because of that. I've said this before because it's something that I don't know. I learned it from a couple of people here who aren't here any longer. But whenever they would refer to Paul, it was always the Apostle Paul. And he wasn't the only apostle, but rarely would someone say, oh, the Apostle James. You ever heard anyone say that? I've always found that, you know, I'm kind of goofy, but I've always find those things interesting. And there's kind of a thunder when they say it. You know, the Apostle Paul. Yeah. But he was no more an apostle than this guy, the two guys that were really kind of mousy, really. That would be Philip and the other James, as much as we could ever figure out about him. So he didn't just take the dynamos. He took all kinds of people, and it was a matter of convenience in some ways, because who becomes apostles in the beginning? The people who are around him. And so they're with him. They've been hearing from John the Baptist, you know, talking about who Jesus was, preparing them. But so they were there, and then they were there. Then what did some of them do? Let's see. How did Nathaniel get found? And how did Peter get found? Well, in the case of Peter, his brother, Nathaniel, goes and gets him. These two are very, very... I think they could be difficult, but all of these guys were a little difficult because a lot of them were thinking very much the same thing about this is going to be great. Jesus is king. We're not sure what that means, but he's going to be king. And where do we want to be? Going back to your point, we want to be next to Jesus. And so that makes them as really good candidates, I would think. But these were the ones, of course, that he chose. And there's the list. And as someone has already said, most of us have learned how to say these in a row, but how many still remember? Now, that would be a good one to ask people. You know. Anybody who's over 20? All right, recite them. Okay, you got to put your hand over your eyes. I can sing the song. I just can't maybe get all the names in there. But nevertheless, there they are. He appointed the 12, Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter. He must have seen something special in him. James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. Now, as I said, some scholar came up with the idea that this was just a kind of a joke. These were, everybody knows what it's like to have a hothead who just can go off at any point in time. Well, that's, I think I don't know how I disagree with it. There's no really nothing contradicting. But all the evidence seems to point to that. But again, Mitch, as he says, Jesus obviously is who he was. He could see something in them, and he can see something in you, and he can see something in me. And so we're not apostles because we know who the apostles were. Those were the original ones down through, as we've noticed there, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, and Matthew. We don't know much about Bartholomew. I want you to think about that for a second. Not everybody has any little, they don't all have bios. Some of them we just don't know. So do you think that might, as I said, do you think that might have any reason why they're not your favorite? Yeah, because you don't know who they are. What do you know about them? Jesus saw something in them and selected them to be his messengers. And that's all we know. But they weren't James and John, and they weren't Peter, and they weren't Paul. But they obviously did something. Now, if you go through and you read through different kinds of books about history of the New Testament and New Testament times, almost all of these guys that we don't know anything about, somebody made up something about them. And it may or may not be true. But these are great stories. I'm trying to think of I can't think of the one right offhand, but this was a guy who had been pointed out as being a bad person by another guy. And so it had been determined that the guy, the to-be apostle, was going to be hung on a cross. And the person who picked on him before got caught for something, and he ends up there with Jesus. And he says, "This is terrible. I feel terrible about what I did to this guy because I've already seen just being around him that he's a noble character." Now, what might cause you to be somewhat questioning about this? You don't find this in the scriptures. It's just written by some early historian. Let's see, I'm trying to think of how. Is it possible that someone thought about the crucifixion and thought about Jesus, and all of a sudden, what do we have? Here's a guy who somehow reflects that. Now, I'm not trying to be cynical or anything like that, but I'm just saying it's an interesting story. It seems to me to be somewhat convenient that it's really a whole lot like Jesus. But I'm going to not knock this guy who wrote the story. I'm just saying that I have a different relationship now with trying to understand apostles. And because most of them don't get a whole lot written about them. And so we learn from other people who are just people, and then we draw some conclusions about them. All I'm trying to get us to understand here is there are reasons why you like people in this congregation. I mean, like them in a special kind of way. Number one, you know them. And number two, you have great respect for them. And so you can't expect that you're going to just automatically love everybody in a very personal kind of way without what? Without contact and connection. And that's something that we all, I mean, you get hammered with that all the time. You know, you got to try to be the sort of person who reaches out to others. And in my experience, you know, over the years, is the people who have their feelings hurt a lot are people who really don't know anybody. And a lot of times, you know, being the lucky, why don't you go to Randy and tell him? They'll explain to me why they're not happy. Nobody cares about me. Now, that's probably not true. You know, I mean, to say that nobody cares for you. Now, it may be almost everybody, and that may be your fault, but for the most part, we get in these things where we just think that everybody else has got a problem and I don't have a problem. My problem is people don't like me. I don't know why. People like that, I promise you, generally don't have a whole lot of insight into why. Whereas for you, you might just pick it out right away. And we get to know people that way. But, you know, the way that you become liked is how? By liking others. That's how it works. There are some people who are really good and they step out and they're better at connecting with other people than most of us. But for the most part, if you want to be accepted, then, you know, it's simplistic, I know, but you've got to accept. You've got to accept people. Then it's going to change everything for you. If you like somebody, almost always people will all of a sudden begin to think, hey, I kind of like that guy. Why is that? Well, he came up and talked to me. So these are all kinds of different people that Jesus picks. And obviously they have things in common, but I want us, you know, to understand that what the whole idea was for what? Jesus to send them into the world. We established that a couple of weeks ago. And there's what do we call what's found there in Mark 16 and Matthew 28? The Great Commission, which tells them to do what? To go out and commit greatly. Not really, but you're the ones have the greatest message that's ever been presented to the world. Go take it out there. The James that we know the least about, he, according to the earthly history or certain legends, he left from there and he went up to Spain. Now, why would that make sense that he would go up to Spain? Or any apostle would go up to Spain? Okay, they're going to all the world. There's not much of what they know of as the world below them down in Israel. And so, where do you go? Yeah, you go up. You go to Europe. You go to the east. And so it makes perfect sense. I think that's probably true. Now, the story about him is that he was killed up there. Someone brought him back to Israel, and he was buried there, supposedly. But then, next thing you know, they found a grave up in Spain that's got his name on the headstone. Now, would they be able to take the body back up there? I suppose they get him on a ship and try, but so that's where the legend is, that, you know, he was loved by so many people up in Spain at that time, and so they take him back up there and bury him there. It's not in the Scriptures. And so we know it's not Scripture, but it's quite possible it's true. I don't know what difference it's going to make. I don't think it's going to make you any better because you know where every apostle was buried. Or you know the language they spoke when they were in the particular place they were. We all know that the apostles, did they have language problems? Well, it was cured, wasn't it? How? Yes, by being able to speak in tongues. So they didn't really have a problem like that. But anyway, I'm just helping us to see that here's somebody who lived really sounds like a fantastic life. And I don't know anything about him, really. So it's kind of hard for me to connect with him. Is your hand up? You. Okay. I guess you're not. You're frozen, so. Well, let's see. Jessica will always feel pointed out. Go ahead, Jessica. Nice and loud now. Come on.
I was just checking. For us only knowing so little about James, the lesser James, son of Alphaeus, considering what we know of secular history, if he did indeed go to Spain, that was no small trip.
Oh, yeah.
From where he was at. That was a long trip
Yeah.
he was willing to take to spread the word of God. So that goes to show his character, that he was also a go-getter.
Yeah, he didn't balk at what the Lord said. Now, I don't know if they were told exactly where to go. We don't have any indication of that. But into the world would be essentially into Europe.
He went into the world. If he went indeed good to Spain, he went into the world, because that's way off
Right,
from where
got
he
it.
would have been.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else have the hand up back there? Okay, so the other thing we know about the apostles, and I'm just trying to lay the groundwork in here because these are very special people. I don't know that I know anywhere where I have seen it demonstrated that any of them spoke in tongues other than what you got on Acts 2, and that was just right at the beginning. After that, I don't know. But Jesus is going to be leaving, and he says, I have many more things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you into all the truth. Is that why we emphasize the words of God? Yes, that's why we emphasize the words of God. He will guide you into all the truth, for he will not speak on his own initiative, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will disclose to you what is it to come, or what's to come. So our job as teachers then is to try to point people out to the things that the apostles, at the direction of Jesus, they were able to do. And he says, he'll guide you into all truth. And in verse 14, he will glorify me, for he will take of mine and will disclose it to you. All things that the Father has are mine. Therefore I said that he takes of mine and will disclose it to you. I don't know, every time I hear that and imagine these apostles sitting down or standing. And we know that this was at the Last Supper, as it's called. And it just amazes me. When you think about really wanting to set people apart, you think about what they were hearing from Jesus. And these were the guys who were going to be the ones who were going to speak that way. Somebody had the opportunity. Who was that? And he didn't get it. Starts with a J. Judas. Right. And so, he had his chance. He chose to turn his back on the Lord. Now, we get into the next person. And we're not going to talk about the James and John. We'll go back to that again. But I want to read to you, and when you look up there, How many of you immediately see the name Philip up there? Well, I know where it is, so, I can... So that means, I know what the answer is. All right. You don't really see too much up there. He's up there, Philip, there in the second line, verse 44, and then he's down there. So let's read and let's see what things you might draw. There's only just a few places in the life of this guy in his relationship to Jesus. So it says, Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found of him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." All right, I don't know. A lot of the writers will say, this guy just was kind of a soft sell. He didn't really move people. And you might draw that conclusion because here he's saying, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law," we got it. Who's that? Who is that? He also starts with a J. Jesus. Okay. This is a great place. You stand up here, you just makes you feel superior, All right. But what's the reaction to Nathanael? What does he have for this guy who says, "Hey, we found him. We found the Messiah"? Yeah. Yeah, you're thinking, did this guy at some point look back on what he said and goes, "Oh, yeah, I shouldn't have said that." But anything, that was the way he looked at it. And so, does Philip get all riled up? No. He says, "Well, come and see." I'm kind of overdoing it a little bit, that he did it in monotone. But, he doesn't get all worked up. When I think of James and John in this situation, the way they were with Samaria, they might have been ready to call fire out of the sky again. How dare you say this about Jesus of Nazareth? But that's all he said. Jesus saw Nathanael coming up to him, and he said, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Okay, now, so how does that fit with his reaction, Nathanael's reaction? Jesus obviously does what? He takes it in a positive way. At least that's what he seeks to do. I don't know if he had all just positive thoughts. But how does it seem to fit with who he was, what kind of person he was, and how Jesus saw him? Yeah. Okay, so here's a guy. So what's his best quality? Is he a great preacher? I have no idea. Maybe he became one. But Jesus looked at this guy and he said, "Here's an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." So what does that really mean? Tell me what you think that means. If you made that assessment about a person. Remember, he's just been introduced to the Son of God. Philip doesn't say, "Well, wait a minute. Let me try this again. Maybe I can get you to understand who I just was introducing you to." I think I would have tried that, but he doesn't. But what's the way the Lord responds? Come on, guys. Yeah, he calls him. It's almost like he's saying, "This is what I'm looking for." And I don't know if that's what Philip thought about him. All Philip is doing, he's just saying, "Well, we found him." The word's out now that we found the Messiah, and they were looking for him because of prophecy, and more specifically, because of the preaching of John the Baptist. So, Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" Does he sound a little bit more honest here and pure, and he doesn't look does he sound cynical at this point? No, he's really wanting to know what's going on there. How do you know me? Jesus answered and said to him, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. I can only imagine him just sort of standing there, his mouth just goes wide open. He's going, man, oh man, how did that happen? And so he draws a conclusion. He's already been set on Jesus by Philip, not a real great salesman, it seems to me. And it says, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, and you are the King of Israel. And this came initially from a guy who had found out about Jesus, and that's Philip. And we really don't know who he's connected to. He doesn't have a brother or anything like that, that he can pair up with. But that's one of the things we read about Philip. So, he's mentioned again in John 6. Now, the book writers will often say that what Philip is that he is kind of Mr. Cool, that he doesn't get too excited about anything. And he's very level-headed. Now, they probably get that from this because of the way he reacts. Because you got a couple of ways you can react to this when you see this whole thing about how do we feed these people. Therefore, Jesus, lifting up his eyes and seeing that the large crowd was coming into him, said to Philip, where are we to buy bread so that these may eat? Of course, he was saying this to test him because he knew what he was going to do. But look at the reaction, the response from Philip. Now, because we know the story, we'll say, oh, this guy, he doesn't really believe in God. He doesn't believe in Jesus. He's just, he's a guy, he's like, they got an accountant with them. And he's going, wait a minute. And we know how accountants are. Where you're not really, you're a friend, Dave, so I don't tag you with that. Okay, but they're level-headed people. I'm checking the books here, and we don't have enough money to feed these people. We got enough for 200 denarii worth of bread. That's just not going to be enough for everyone to receive a little. All right, so what do you learn about him? I've already tried to throw the wood on the fire, but what about it? Is that? I'd say that's it. He's Mr. Practical is kind of the impression that I get. And again, so you're thinking, we go back to the two brothers who just were ready to make it to the top. And here comes this guy. You can see he's got the little bag of money and he's going through it. He's trying to count it all up. But what does Jesus know he's going to do? What's Jesus going to do? A miracle and feed them. Now, we find it easy to sort of judge these guys because they didn't immediately see, aha, Jesus could do this. Remember, these people are still kind of in the formative phase here. They haven't really seen the complete record of Jesus. But God doesn't, through his Son, he doesn't rebuke him. He just uses him to prove a point. Now, this is another situation where we have two rather accountant-likes, I guess, and that is the guy we call the one who doubts, and that's Thomas. But anyway, he's talking about leaving. And of course, they don't know it, but he's going to go where? He's going to die. And then eventually he's going to ascend to heaven. And he says, Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How do we know the way? And then Jesus said, I am the truth, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you know him and have seen him. So, did these guys come out like you would think? Okay, these guys are going to be great apostles. They just figured it all out. I mean, these people really love the Lord. And they understand these miracles. They don't do that, do they? They're practical. I think that's what it is. They're practical. They're thinking, wait a minute, I'm still not sure about what's going on here. Of course, according to Jesus, they should be, but they're not. But that doesn't mean he pushes them out. So that's another place where you read about what Thomas says. And let's see, Philip's in there somewhere. Do I see him? All right. Yeah, here we go. Oh, it's on the next page. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. Just give me the evidence. Jesus said, well, have I been with you so long, and yet you have not come to know me, Philip? So he didn't just choose the people who said, I'm ready to go die for you. He looks at people who maybe can be a little bit doubtful, a little bit practical. But when they understood it, what did they do? They accepted it. But they were just a little slow at doing it. All right. So that's what we really know about Philip. That's it. You might be able to find some more, but I promise you won't, Go ahead, Robert.
Well, one of the things that I find about Philip is you read a couple of different places where he fails the test, where Jesus asks him something and he fails. It makes him supremely relatable, and I think it makes a lot of the apostles relatable because they still have an uptake period where they're not getting it.
Yeah.
In addition, though, one of the things I think is really admirable about Philip is he's not the smartest, not the fastest on the uptake, but just like with Andrew, his strength was in, okay, I know Jesus is worthwhile for you to hear them.
Yeah.
Come and see. Inviting people to come and see Christ for themselves, which to me, I think, makes him a very good example of an evangelist in a sense of, okay, I may not have all the answers, but I can show you where you need to go.
Yeah.
And that is Jesus.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly true in this particular case. I mean, these people, was it a little bit hard for Thomas to get this thing together? Yes, because when Jesus comes back alive after he's risen from the dead, does he go, well, remember that little situation that we had earlier on? And I really learned it when Jesus told me exactly what was going wrong here. You've been around me and you haven't gotten anything out of it. And he goes, yeah, I got it now. He didn't though. But he doesn't get fired. The Lord still takes him. And as we say, the rest is history. Now, so what do we know about James the Less? This is the one that I said earlier as we bring this to a close. This is when Jesus was on the cross and dying. Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last, and the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. When the centurion who was standing right in front of him saw the way he breathed his last, he said, truly this man was the Son of God. There were also some women looking on from a distance, among whom was Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James the Less, Joseph, and Salome. Now, what does that tell you? Does that tell you anything about James? James the Lesser. Yeah, that's right. His mom's there, and that probably says a little bit about what?
You know his father's name, he's the son of Alphaeus, so there you go.
Well,
He knows both parents' names.
yeah. There are arguments about that, but but anyway, they're not that important really. But yeah, so we already know, and we know he's not there. The father isn't there, but the mother is. So what does that tell you about him? He came from a good mother that was brave enough to stand there and be with Jesus as he died. So I wouldn't say that immediately makes James the lesser, the morer, but it shows that he had a good opportunity to understand who Jesus was. So I thought I'd do a little cartoon, But That's all, folks. Okay. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience with me. I always appreciate it.